what are the top variables that you take into account that you feel are the most important things as you guys are looking at deals?
Yeah, well, clearly founder team is a very important one. But when you think about founder team, because we typically take an active role in helping to shape that longer term, like by adding key members and working with team coaching and things like that. But the real key for me with a founder is somebody that's receptive to change, because as you grow, if you think about a company with $10 million, that company's CEO is going to be making all the decisions and involved in every decision. But when that company gets to 200 million, they can't be involved in the decision. So you have to be willing to push down decision making. And that isn't always evident and requires a lot of one-on-one conversations and whatnot with CEOs, because it's critically important when you think of the really good CEOs that have grown and become the same CEO founder at 200 million, Jesse Merrill at Good Culture and Caitlin Smith, they all were willing to make that change and adapt. And so that's critically important. And the most important part of this team. Unit economics is always very high on our list. When you think of unit economics, it's really about, because it might be that they're just afraid to charge enough. Are they charging enough for the product? If their margin's only 30%, is it 30% because they're just afraid to charge? Or is it 30% because it's just structurally they can't do any better than that? And
Right.
we try to dive into that, because something like a good culture where you can't keep the product on shelf, we've increased price multiple times because you haven't really found the spot where there's not saturation really. So it's important to be able to figure that out and get a feel for that. The place on the shelf is important, although I've seen a lot of really good companies create categories. Once Upon a Farm is a great example of that. And
Yeah, good point.
now you've got a legendary founder there and a celebrity involved. So that makes it a little bit easier. People are creating categories all the time. Mush is another example. They're being sold in the yogurt space, but they're really an overnight oats company that's ready to eat. So
Yeah,
it's interesting. Those things can happen. They are harder, but they also can be much more rewarding.
true. Yeah, for sure. If you make it work, it can be a much bigger upside, right?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing about differentiation, and we have this conversation a lot with the team, because, people will say, what's the moat? And I blanch at that a bit. And the reason is because I don't believe with today's food scientists, we have just amazing food scientists across this country. And I believe that they can replicate any product on the shelf. Oreos, Doritos, whatever you want to say, they can replicate the exact taste, but they can't supplant that brand. The moat is the brand. And that's really vitally important in what we look at is and that when you're small, what that brand is how does it resonate with the consumer? And usually it's associated with a founder story. So there was something that happened to the founder or somebody in their family, and they changed how they were eating as a result. And that led to this product. And that then really resonates with consumers, and consumers hold that
Yeah.
and say, yes, I can see me in that. And that is vitally important to building a moat. So when I think about moat, it's usually around the brand, as opposed to some kind of unique scientific formulation, patented. I just don't see that as much. And like I said, the food scientists can replicate anything these days. So it's really about building that emotion through the brand that you create the moat.